Welcome to the Heal Your Hunger Show, where we get to the heart of why you overeat and how to stop. If you struggle with food and weight like I did, welcome home.
Welcome everybody to the Heal Your Hunger Show. So happy to have you here. It is a great day to be alive. And I'm recording live in the Secret Sauce group. So join us in the Secret Sauce to End Emotional Eating Now on Facebook. Just type in Secret Sauce to End Emotional Eating and you can join us there and join the conversation and be a part of my live recordings. And also just get support, because nobody can overcome overeating and emotional eating and binge eating and food addiction and all the crazy things we do with food. Nobody can overcome that alone. So I want to welcome you if you're here for the first time to the show. If you're a veteran, welcome back. So happy to have you here. Yeah, it's a great day to be alive. I'm so grateful. So today I'm talking about a really great topic. I think doesn't get enough airtime. And so that's why I'm excited to talk about it today. I'm really, what's the word? I'm really filled, satisfied, nourished. Just coming off the end of my Quit Sugar Challenge and our Quit Sugar Challenge. If you're a part of it, it was a group effort for sure, and that was really amazing. So I'm just excited to be here today after just a whirlwind week of the Quit Sugar Challenge. I'm back to the Secret Sauce group. If you've joined the Secret Sauce group and you're new, welcome. Really happy you're here. So this is a topic that I think is really important to talk about. And I'm going to tell you, it was inspired by a client. So this amazing, wonderful woman who shall remain nameless in the spirit of anonymity, she came to me and wanted help with her eating. But as we spoke, this is about 90 days ago, as we spoke, she talked about her dilemma of having her employees. She has a business and she has several employees, and her employees all the time end up quitting on her. So when she was talking about what she wanted in terms of her relationship with food, what kept coming up is she wanted to stop being a bitch. And she was so honest about it. It was so refreshing. I love when people are honest about their stuff. You know, it's like, let's stop like farting around here. Let's get to the point. She had a problem with being a bitch. And she would criticize her employees. They were never doing it right. She could always do it better. Why did you do it that way? You know, what's wrong with you? Her attitude was always sort of, whether she said it or not, was like, what's the matter with you? Like, why can't you do it right? And they'd get fed up and they'd leave. And she's like, Tricia, I can't keep employees, you know, in my practice. And not only that, my husband, you know, poor guy, is taking lashings from me left and right because he never does anything right. And so she was quite honest about this. And as I spoke with her, I knew I could help. You know, I felt 100% confident I could help, not only with her relationship with food. You know, she's an emotional eater. I have a step-by-step process for overcoming that. You know, that definitely can happen. But I also knew I could help her with her inner bitch, which was coming out as an outer bitch for sure. And so she's been through the process, and yes, she's made unbelievable progress, you know, on all fronts. Her relationship with food, her employees, she's given up, you know, micromanaging them. They now know they have, you know, some autonomy, and they can follow their heart. They can, you know, they're intelligent women. They know how to do their job, and she's entrusting them with that and getting out of the way. So that's going more smoothly. And of course, her husband is thrilled. You know, he's not getting his head bitten off every couple days. And the upshot is that this woman feels better about herself. She's not carrying around all this guilt. She's not feeling isolated because she's basically, she's alienated everybody around her by being nitpicky and critical and harsh. And of course, that all impacts her relationship with food. And I talk about her because when I was referring to her progress recently in my Quit Sugar Challenge, it was fascinating to me that of all the different clients I talked about and all their different successes in their lives on account of going through my program, the thing that seemed to hit the chord the most with the women in this challenge was that, the inner bitch, and these women totally related to that and totally were like commenting like, oh my God, I get so hangry, I get so bitchy, and I snap at people and then I feel guilty and then I eat to beat myself up. I sort of punish myself by overeating and binging, eating sugar and hurting myself, hurting my body. And I just, light bulb went off and I thought, I talk about this to some degree, but not enough. And why not? Because I relate to that 100%. I was such a bitch, and it was actually probably the thing that was most frustrating to me and the thing I really wanted to change more than anything. So it's like, why did I not connect the dots? It wasn't until this client, came right out with it. She's like, I'm a bitch to everybody I know. She was so refreshingly honest. And when I saw the response of other women who related to that, I'm like, of course, that was my problem too. I've just been, I haven't been a bitch for a long time. So I kind of forgot. And so I forgot what it was like to live that way. And I really believe this is a problem for emotional eaters across the board. And the funny thing is that, it's counterintuitive because so much of the time we spend exerting ourselves trying to be nice. So emotional eaters are like, they have hundreds of pounds of nice on them, right? And so we are the consummate people pleasers. You've heard me talk about that. And, and if you relate and you're, tracking with me, please comment. I'm recording this live from the Secret Sauce group. But anyway, we're people pleasers. So we're always being nice. We're always accommodating. We're always saying, sure, I'll handle it. Sure, I'll help you with that. Sure, let me take care of it. Sure, I'll host the party. Sure, I'll be the one to drive everybody, or I'll be the designated driver, whatever. We're so nice and we're so accommodating. And guess what? It leads us to overeat. How? Because we don't always really feel that way. We're saying it because we want to be liked. And we're so intent on being liked because we don't like ourselves. And we think if somebody outside of me thinks that I'm great, then maybe it'll come true. But we don't believe it. So we spend all our time trying to get everybody around us to think we're wonderful, to comment on how wonderful we are. And yet we don't believe it. And it doesn't sink in. In fact, we, in our head, we always think if they only knew me, they wouldn't be saying those nice words about me, right? I always thought that, oh boy, if they only knew me, they would kick me out of the club because I'm not all that. I work hard at looking like I am, but I'm not. In fact, I'm a bitch. So I spent a lot of time trying to cover up this bitchy part of me. And because it was horrible. I mean, my thought life was so negative and so critical. I could cut somebody to shreds in my mind. I had terrible thoughts about people who were close to me, best friends. I would have this tension around people who are close to me, which is part of the problem because I was afraid of intimacy. So the closer someone was to me, the more, I'd have my nails out kind of, scratching at them in my mind, maybe not in real life, and maybe sometimes yes. But I had this thought life for sure that was very negative and critical and bitchy. and mean, so mean. And it was just so contrary to the way I came across to people. And that's what made it so hard for me to understand and really metabolize. And I just thought to myself, Tricia, what is up? Like, why are you so mean? And why do you like think such mean things towards other people? And there's no question about it. I was mean too. I mean, I could be catty and gossipy and, try to make myself look better than other people because I felt less than. So it's not like it was all in my head either. I could be a bitch. No question about it. With my former husband, I could be a bitch. I was very controlling and critical, emasculating in that way. And that felt terrible. I had this internal tension and this internal negativity that made me feel really bad about myself. Because guess what? In my heart of hearts, where I lived, in that God part of me, that spark of divinity that lay very deep inside of me, I was not a bitch. And neither are you. The truth is, deep inside of me was a child of God, pure in her essence. But I was afraid to let her out. I was afraid to let her out. I was afraid to let anybody close to me because I had as a kid and I got hurt. Many of us have experienced sexual abuse as a child, a horrid thing for a child to have to experience. We trusted, we got used, we got hurt, and then we're like, never doing that again. Never trusting somebody in my life who's close, or somebody with authority, or somebody that seems nice. I'm not letting anybody in. I'm not going through it again. So we put up these walls around our heart. And even though we act nice, we've got steel around our heart and we're not letting anybody in. And this is what leads to overeating, because we're not letting love in. We're not letting the healing power of God in, because we're so tight and constricted and afraid of getting close to anyone. And when we have that wall up, it's easier for us to be bitchy. And not only that, add to that this self-hatred that I felt toward myself. I hated myself. I hated my body. And I spent a lot of time thinking very critical, mean, hateful thoughts towards my body. And if you can relate to this, please put comments in the comment section. And so, I was beating on myself all the time, not just about my body or in my eating, my out of control eating, but about everything. I just thought I was a loser. I was, my fundamental beliefs about myself is I was stupid, I was bad, and I was ugly. And I believed those things to the core. I didn't let on that I believed those things. I tried to act like I felt fine about myself. And I had a strong sense of self-esteem and self-confidence, but not deep down where I lived. I had so much insecurity, so much self-doubt, and so much self-hatred. And what my mentor, Roy, at the time said to me is he said, people are always getting the spillover of what we're doing to ourselves. So it makes sense that people around me were getting this mean girl, this bitchy part of me, this critical, controlling, you can't do it right attitude. That's what was coming out of me, because that's what I was doing to myself. And people were getting the spillover of what I was doing to myself. And what I was doing to myself was not pretty or nice. So I was a bitch, either in thought, but often in action as well, or at least in words, right? And words, we know, can cut like a knife. Words do hurt. And so, I was beating myself up all the time. If you have ever heard my podcast before or been in my classes, I talk about the PEP formula. And this is something that very succinctly describes the three primary driving emotions of emotional eating and binging and food addiction, sugar addiction. And the PEP is an acronym, and it's a way of describing kind of why we use food. So we use food. The first P is for a painkiller, because we have pain. And we have pain because of all kinds of reasons, things that happened to us as a kid, a job that's not fitting us anymore, a relationship that should have been over 5 years ago, a sick parent, a sick child, stress, you name it. There's so much emotional pain to go around. There's no shortage. The E in PEP stands for escape, and we use food as a form of escape because we have a lot of fear, okay? Fear, self-doubt, worry, and those gnawing anxieties drive our eating, right? So it's not only a painkiller where it just like, you get enough carbs and sugar and you just put a blanket right over that pain where you feel no pain. Some TV, some binge foods, you're numbed out. Well, we use food to really treat those anxieties, those free-floating anxieties as well. In our racing minds, we get the serotonin hit. It calms our minds down because otherwise we're just complete worry warts, worrying and fretting about everything. So we use food as a form of escape. And we also use food as a form of punishment. That's the third P or the third letter and the second P in PEP. So we use food as a form of punishment because we have guilt. And often when I talk about this, I think people are thinking, wow, that's strange. I use food as a reward. I didn't think of using it that I use it as guilt, as a form of punishment. But in light of this conversation about being a bitch, it makes sense, doesn't it? I felt so bad about my inner thought life and the way I was around people I was supposed to love, just always criticizing them. I could look at someone and immediately, like 3 or 4 thoughts in my head, judgments, like, why is she wearing that? Or, geez, she could use a haircut, or, bad color on her. Like, I just immediately just rattle off these different criticisms and judgments. So thanks for commenting, Cheryl. Yes, is what she said with a lot of S's. And so I felt so bad, and I felt like such a fraud. I'd be around my friends and I'd act nice, and then I'd be criticizing them in my head, and I'd feel, what's wrong with me? I'm such a bitch, and my husband, he could never do anything right. I just was so aggravated all the time, and it was a terrible feeling. Poor guy, he didn't deserve that. I couldn't let him just be. That's going to be a whole nother podcast, by the way, coming soon. So, but the bottom line is this way of being that I had, that was, my inner world versus my outer world, and the way they were so incongruent made me feel really bad about myself. And yes, I used food as a form of punishment because I felt so guilty for this negative rant that was constantly in my head, and these feelings, when you're just angry all the time and you're angry at people. I just lived with this tension and this tenseness and constriction in my heart, where I was just like, I had a smile plastered on my face, but inside I'm just all twisted up and just feeling so aggravated by people when they wouldn't do it my way, or they wouldn't do it right, or they just wouldn't stop bothering me. I was like, Jesus, leave me alone. And my favorite thing to say, I used to say this all the time, is that just bugs me, or that I can't stand that. I hate that. I can't stand that. That bugs me. I always had these strong statements about things in my life because everything just made me feel so aggravated and angry. Do you ever feel that way? I know for a fact that I'm not the only one, and neither is the client I told you about. I think there's a lot of us out there, in spite of wanting to be good. And, I wanted to be so good. I wanted to be a good person, but I didn't feel like a good person. And that, feeling of being misaligned, out of alignment with the person I wanted to be, really drove me to my knees. That was a big driver of my hitting bottom with my food addiction, and all my other addictions, is just to feel like, God, I am not the person I want to be. I don't feel good. I don't think good. I don't act good. And I'm not good. And I oftentimes just felt like I wasn't a good person. And I, sometimes Roy would say to me, you think you're bad, don't you? And I would literally say back to him, I know I'm bad. And that's what I believed about myself. Now, a lot of that goes back to my early days in my childhood, sexual abuse. It's a prescription for hating yourself and thinking you're fundamentally flawed or stained. But other kinds of abuse that people experience make them feel like they're bad, So yeah, I believed I was bad. I could never be good. And hence, as he thinks in, Jesus said, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. I believed I was bad. And so that's kind of what was going on in my life. Even though I did good acts, oh my God, volunteer work and always helping out. I mean, the people pleaser, run-of-the-mill people pleaser, always stepping in to do good deeds, but really as a cover up because I thought I was bad. So if you can relate to this, don't worry, you're not alone. There's lots of us out there. But the good news is you don't have to live that way anymore. You don't have to live believing you're a bitch. You don't have to live being a bitch, and you've got to, in my experience, in order to stop overeating, you've got to address this situation. You got to address this inner stuff. That's why diets are so silly. 90% of all diets fail because you change how much you eat. You start jogging 3 miles a day, but if you don't do anything about this inner bitch, you're going to feel so guilty and so bad, you'll be back to the food and beating yourself up. That's where self-sabotage comes from, my friends. Self-sabotage comes from believing we don't deserve good. And we believe we don't deserve good because we're thinking awful thoughts towards people and often doing fearful things. We don't do bad things generally because we're bad. We do bad things because we're afraid, afraid we're not going to have enough, afraid we're not going to get enough attention or love or money or, acclaim or whatever it is. It always comes from fear. And I lived in a lot of fear. I did not trust that I would be okay, So to wrap it up, I just want to say that, this feeling of just being angry all the time and frustrated and not being able to overcome it, that is a symptom that emotional eaters face all the time, or they feel all the time. They haven't faced it. And I want to, just say you can face it. You don't have to live feeling that way and hating yourself. I hated myself so much. I hated myself. And because of that, as within, so without. So I was a bitch. And then I hated myself some more. I hated myself for overeating. I was miserable when I binged. Katie barred the door. After a binge, I was so miserable, so self-hating, you didn't want to be around me. So I would be hurtful at other people inadvertently, and then I'd feel guilty, and then I'd just beat myself up some more. I'm just such a failure at living. So if you relate to any of that, I just want to say that this is very typical for emotional eaters, and it's a vicious cycle. And yes, it drives self-sabotage. And you don't have to live that way anymore. As I said, it's been years really that I felt like I was a bitch. I used to have a friend in college. I mean, this is such a thing. She and we used to say, I don't know why we started doing this, but we saw a movie or something, and then we started saying we are not bitches. Like, we used to say that to each other because, of course, we thought we were. So we're like, no, we're like defending ourselves. We're like, we're not bitches. And we would say that because we knew we were. So thankfully, I'm not that way. And my clients, because they're letting go of the shame of being an emotional eater and the shame of overeating, and they're starting to get right in their relationship with food, they're starting to just let go of all the things that they thought were so bad about themselves. They're just blossoming, and they're becoming much happier people and much more pleasant to be around. They're treating themselves with love. And as a result, they're treating people around them in much more loving ways, and vice versa. They're no longer feeling all tense and angry and stressed out. And so they're treating other people in a loving way, and it's making them love themselves more. It works both ways. So I hope that helps. You don't have to live that way anymore, and you don't have to hide it anymore. Join us in the Secret Sauce group. There's a bunch of women there who have been bitches. So we can get together, we can support each other in finding a new way of living. So I want that for you. Thanks so much. Love you so much. Be well.
If you enjoyed this podcast and want to get free support, insider health info, exclusive invites to events, and more, visit healyourhunger.com.